Huh. Guess I gotta like connect my Steam account or something, huh? Oh. Well then. It'll come back up eventually. Right? Even though it did take me like, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours to even get into the game past the launch time, we got in, we did pretty well. Right now for me, it's at the end of my day one, essentially, you could say. Even though this video might go up like a day later than that. Keep in mind, this is degenerate hours day one, so it's like the first 24 hours after launch. But things went pretty well for me. I did end up making it all the way to Act 4, or, you know, cruel difficulty, I guess you could say. So I finished the campaign. I thought the campaign was really fun, really enjoyable. There are definitely some concerns for people when it comes to difficulty. My build did extremely well, and I think a lot of the more experienced players did extremely well, but I do think that it is overcomable as long as you build your character correctly and you worry about the correct things. However, a lot of people are running into something that I would call skill issue, unfortunately. I see a lot of people just trying to like brute force the bosses, and that's just not how you can go about it. You do need to upgrade your character, you do need to upgrade your gear, but you also kind of have to like learn the mechanics of the bosses. It's not like PoE1 where you can kind of just ignore everything and just blast. Here, the boss mechanics matter quite a bit. I'll make a section more towards the end of this video talking about some ways that you can help yourself a little bit, but I kind of do want to talk about the character for right now, because this character in particular, the one that I made, is a fragmentation rounds / glacial bolt mercenary, and we did end up going as the Witchhunter, although I will probably be changing the points that I'm taking on the Witchhunter. Talk about that in a minute. So let's talk about the basis of this character. So our main skill is fragmentation rounds, although it's kind of glacial bolt now, but our main skill is fragmentation rounds. The idea behind this is that it is a shotgun, and when you shoot with it, it fires a bunch of projectiles, and all of those projectiles can shotgun and hit the same target. However, it does consider all of those separate projectiles as one hit if they all hit the same target. This ability is pretty decent. It's the first ability that you get in the game. I think it does okay damage as long as you're up close and personal with enemies. However, when it really starts to shine is because of the second aspect of it, in that it can explode ice crystals immediately. So what does this mean? On fragmentation rounds, if you read here, it says bolts that hit a frozen enemy consume the freeze and cause an explosion of shrapnel, and bolts that hit an ice crystal cause it to explode. Now, what is an ice crystal? If you're familiar with PoE1, these are the little crystals that you can make through a bunch of different skills. They kind of just block enemies and prevent them from moving around, and they can be destroyed. Its normal attack damage is 42%, and you can have up to 10 fragments per shot hitting an enemy. However, versus Frozen, the attack damage is 814%, and it has an explosion of 1.5 meters. This is massive. So the whole idea behind this skill is that we're trying to freeze things, and we are trying to kill ice crystals so that they can explode and do a whole bunch of damage. Now, notably, this is something I was actually not aware of. This payoff skill, what it means is that they have powerful effects when hitting enemies with specific debuffs, but payoff skills cannot inflict the debuff they interact with. I was actually completely unaware of this. I attribute it to like me being kind of stressed at the event and not like looking through every single tiny thing. However, you cannot freeze with this, so I did change up the build slightly. And that is, I made Glacial Bolt basically completely focused on trying to freeze enemies. So previously I was using this Fortress support with Glacial Bolt. I will go ahead and show you what Fortress looks like here. So if we take Fortress and we put it in a Glacial Bolt here, you'll see that it makes this circle, right? But you can already kind of see the problem, the first problem that I ran into with Fortress. If there is not a lot of room, you get almost no upside from having Fortress in this gym. Like if you are in tight corridors, which a lot of the game ends up being tight corridors, you get no benefit from this gym. So it doesn't really make sense to deal 50% less damage with hits just to have a circle around enemies. Really genuinely does not make sense. So I completely stopped using that support gem. It made no sense whatsoever. And I just focused on doing as much damage with Glacial Bolt as I possibly could, because if we look at Glacial Bolt, you'll notice that it has this extra section here called Wall, right? So it deals 48% of attack damage, which is okay, it's not great. But if you look at Wall, the wall has an attack damage as well. And interestingly enough, these walls, when you explode them with fragmentation rounds, the walls themselves are what is considered the damage the fragmentation rounds is doing. So the only purpose of fragmentation rounds is just simply to explode these walls and deal the damage of the walls. So I'll kind of show you a little bit. So let's go out here. This is cruel difficulty, essentially like Act 4. And I'll just shoot some enemies here. And I still do damage, right? Like fragmentation rounds is still hitting things like somewhat hard, but it's not doing amazing, right? Like we're not doing great damage against white mobs. However, if we pop up some of these walls here and hit them like this, you'll notice that the mobs get one shot by those frozen walls, right? And it kind of like cascades through all the enemies. So the idea here is that it's the walls themselves that have the damage modifier. So if you scale the damage of Glacial Bolt itself and then just shoot it with fragmentation rounds, you can kind of double dip on those huge amounts of damage, meaning that you're getting all of the good damage here from the walls, meaning like 96% per each little tiny fragmentation of the wall, right? It's not just like the whole wall does 96%, it's each little bit of the wall explodes separately. And then on top of that, because we are using glaciation, we're causing a lot more freezes with this skill and a lot more freezes when the walls explode, which means that we're getting to use that versus frozen 814% attack damage mod here. This is letting me like one-shot blue mobs, like insta-kill yellows sometimes. It's a pretty strong combination. Going into some of the other skills that I use, I am using Flash Grenade. I'm not using this as much anymore. It's basically just kind of like my I'm surrounded and I need a little bit of time to think button. This just kind of stuns, it blinds stuff, it can blind you as well, so if you get hit by it, you get blinded. And then for my aura, I am using Wind Dancer. Evasion is very powerful. Armor, evasion, energy shield all seem pretty good. You shouldn't be avoiding these. They're very, very good. With very little evasion gear, I'm already at 55% evasion with this buff up. And on top of that, it's also knocking people back whenever they get too close into melee. It's a very, very powerful buff. I like this quite a bit. Now, as for the support gems that we're using on here, I'll just go through them quickly. When you're starting with fragmentation rounds, I do think that you should use Lightning Infusion as your very first support gem. It doesn't make sense to try to go cold since you can't freeze anyways, and shock will give you a lot more damage. And this is just scaling off of your weapons damage anyways. Like the cold damage that we're dealing is all from Glacial Bolt. Like that's all that we care there. So we just go Lightning Infusion because it gives us some extra damage. We're mainly scaling projectile damage and elemental damage on the tree, so it doesn't really matter what damage type we go. Might as well just try to do lightning damage here, right? Because the extra verse frozen damage that we get here is all just off of our main damage, whatever it is. This isn't cold damage, it's all physical or lightning or anything like that. The next gem that I would suggest using is Double Barrel. I tried using ammo conservation early on and it just feels bad because of how random it is. You want the control of Double Barrel early, and then if you get another slot, then you can use ammo conservation. As for Glacial Bolt, like I said, I did try Fortress. It just doesn't feel good. If you're going to play Glacial Bolt, I think you use Glaciation as your first link. I think you use Ice Bite as your second link, and you use Cold Infusion as your third link. The reason for this is you really want to be freezing things. It's how you're getting the payoff from fragmentation rounds. This also applies to the walls that it creates, so this is very effective. You do want to use Ice Bite because you're going to be freezing things constantly anyways, and this makes it so that your fragmentation rounds does more damage as well. It also makes your Flash Grenade do more damage too. But this is super powerful, and I have it up almost all the time. And then if we're just looking for a little bit more damage, Cold Infusion is also good. But later on, you'll get some better support skills that you can use instead of Cold Infusion here. As for Flash Grenade, I highly suggest that you use Scatter Shot. This makes it so that it gives you much better coverage with this ability, especially if you're just trying to get away from enemies. And then Overpower is just going to make it stun more if you're trying to stun bosses and such. For Wind Dancer, I haven't gotten any additional Spirit yet. I'm still sitting on 30, so I can't do anything with this. But you could probably put like Vitality or something in here if you wanted something extra, and don't worry about Ripwire Ballista. Now, talking a bit about the Ascendancy, okay? Honestly, I'm going to change up the Ascendancy probably a decent amount here in the coming however many days that I play this. I do think that Culling Strike and Decimating Strike are both fine. I haven't gone Decimating Strike yet because I was like very, very overwhelmed by the Ultimatum trial. For some reason, I kept getting awful modifiers and it was really hard to finish it, so I just decided to go ahead and finish the campaign instead, and I'm probably going to go do this here like when I wake up most likely. However, I do want to talk about Sorcery Ward because we finally got to look at what this does. Barrier can take elemental damage up to 30% of your armor and evasion rating, and quality brings that up to 40% of your armor and evasion rating. That's pretty nuts. If I'm gonna be real with you, that's pretty nuts. Yeah, this reduces your like armor and evasion rating by 50%, like you only get half of it. But the fact that you're just going to be able to take a ton less elemental damage just in general, and then you will have some armor, right? Like you're still going to want to scale armor and evasion for this. This ward is pretty strong, if I'm going to be real with you. Like it's pretty strong. It's from hits only, but that's still really good. And you can see that at level 12, however, what level I currently am, level 46, recharges in 8.9 seconds. And then if you get the second point back here, increased effective sorcery ward, and sorcery ward recovers 50% faster. So it's going to be a huge amount of your armor and evasion, even though it's getting reduced by half, and it's going to recover faster, so it'll probably recover in like 4, maybe 5 seconds most of the time. I think that this is going to be super strong, so there is a chance that I just go Witchbane, No Mercy, Obsessive Ritual, Ceremonial Ablution. I gotta test this. For right now, you can just go Pitiless Killer and Judge during Executioner. Like, this is perfectly fine, there's no problem here. But I'll do some more testing and I'll get back to you guys in another update video. For clear, I don't feel like I need Zealous Inquisition at all. My clear already feels really insanely good, so I'm not too worried about taking this. As for the actual passive tree, I went almost exactly what I was expecting to. However, I will give you one caveat if you're wanting to try to follow in my footsteps. Go for this reload speed as fast as you possibly can. If I had to tell you a path to take, come down through all this projectile damage. If you feel immediately like you need more damage, you can go and get this two-hand stuff, but only take this if you feel like you need more damage. If you have a good weapon and it feels like you're doing damage, just keep moving through these points down here and just head towards this crossbow reload speed. The reload speed makes or breaks the gameplay feel of this build. It is like non-negotiable. You need to get to this reload speed. Grab damage if you absolutely feel like you have to and you can't progress. But once you get this reload speed and then later on you get this little bit of reload speed here, the build feels super good. Like I have absolutely no problems with game feel. Feels really solid, does really good damage. Everything feels super good. But other than that, the tree went pretty much exactly like I thought it would. I did stop by and grab some armor and evasion here and some stun threshold very early on. This was one of the first points that I got. This did feel pretty good early, but we just come down here through this projectile damage. I'm still not 100% certain if you are able to chain off of ice crystals. I don't know if they're terrain also, like I'm just not sure, but there are a lot of close quarters here, so this is still pretty decent. I did come and grab some of this two-handed damage because crossbows are two-handed weapons. Over here to the right, I grabbed this accuracy node. I don't really feel like I have any problems with accuracy as far as I can tell. Like I think my chance to hit stuff has pretty much always been 100. Yeah, it says estimated main hand chance to hit within 2 meters. It seems like it's always been at 100. I've never seen it be below that. So I did take these nodes because it gives you accuracy rating equal to your strength and you get some attack damage and such from it. And then down here, this node, increased chance to inflict ailments with projectiles, just makes it so we can freeze a little bit more often. It's got a little bit of damage. And then of course we have chance for crossbow attacks to not consume a bolt. And we're swapping between ammunition types pretty frequently. So this is 50% increased damage with crossbows. Pretty solid, honestly. And then the last thing that I moved towards here is going to be this increased freeze and chance to shock, and then this damage penetration of elemental resistances. As for where I'm going after this, probably this way. I'm going to start heading into this area here, maybe thinking about going crit. I'm not 100% certain. I also do think that I maybe want to grab some of this freeze buildup wherever it is. Yeah, so some of this freeze buildup here, depending on how hard it is to freeze stuff. I'm not 100% certain. Like I said, I'll get back to you in another update video about that. As for talking about the gear, my gear is honestly kind of bad. Like, it's really not that great. I just tried to get as much life and as much resistances as I could on anything. These little runes are actually really solid, and I do suggest that you look out for pieces of gear that have runes on them, especially if they're white. Because if you find a white piece of gear and it has a rune slot on it, you can essentially make just a really solid piece of gear immediately by using something like one of these essences. Like, you can use an essence, you can give a chest piece a cold modifier, most likely it'll be resistance, and then you'll be able to put a resist or a life rune in it, and you can upgrade it with, you know, the typical transmutation, augmentation, and such. Now, I did not find a lot of alchemy orbs, but I will update my previous guide that I made on the Big Ducks channel. Alchemy orbs give you exactly 4 modifiers. That's just what they do. They don't give you a random amount, but I only found one of them through my entire playthrough. But I found tons of exalts, tons of regals. I found a few chaos. I did end up using pretty much all of my exalts trying to craft gear, but my gear is pretty simple. I will say on the crossbow, you do want to favor fast crossbows with low reload time. It is much more important than you think that it is. Other than that, just go for physical damage as best you can. This elemental damage on here is pretty decent, but it's honestly not that huge. This doesn't affect fragmentation rounds very much at all, and while I am converting most of my damage, so this is good, the base physical damage on the weapon is much more important. But the rest of my gear, life, evasion, armor, and as much resistance as you possibly can get. Like my gear genuinely is not that good. I did end up using a stone charm to prevent myself from being stunned. I was having a problem occasionally where I was getting stunned. I swapped this out for a freeze charm in one of the areas. I don't remember what it was, but there was this area where I was getting frozen a ton. I think it was in Act 3. So you can use pretty much whatever charm that you want for whatever area that you need to do. But the gear is pretty simple. There's really nothing crazy here. As for a couple of notes about how you can make the campaign for yourself easier, the main thing that I want to try to reinforce to people is that you need to craft stuff. Like, you have to craft stuff. You can't get away from it. I pretty much the entire campaign disenchanted every single rare that I did not need. I didn't care how good it was. I didn't care how bad it was. If I was not putting it on my character, I disenchanted it, right? So I'd come over here to Una, and I'd come here, and I'd pop this in and disenchant it, because you need regal shards more than anything. This is the limiting factor when you are leveling up and trying to gear your character, is getting regal orbs. These orbs are the #1 priority in my opinion, bar none, because you will get gold by killing enemies. You will get gold by selling random blue items. You will have plenty of transmutations, plenty of augmentations. You do not need to disenchant blue items at all. You will have these in spades. You'll have a ton of them. Regals are very hard to get. I got less regal orbs than I did exalted orbs. I got way less regal orbs than I did exalted orbs. So every time you get a rare, hold on to it, take it to town. You'll be able to take it. I don't want to spoil people story-wise if they haven't really done very much story, but there's an NPC that will allow you to identify items, and once you find him, if you control click him, he will automatically identify items for you. Like, you can just control click, instant identify, and then take them over to whoever the disenchanting vendor is. They're different in every single act. Disenchant all of your rares, turn them into regals, and work on upgrading your gear. The #1 thing that I suggest is find a base that has the correct stats for you. Like, if you are playing this character, armor and evasion are super important. Get a good armor evasion white piece of gear. Try to look for ones that already have these sockets for these runes in it, and then use essences if you have them. Like, you can use some of these like fire or cold modifiers. You can also use physical modifiers on weapons if you find one. Use that on it, and then use this currency. If you get 2 good mods, use a regal, but really hold on to these regals until you find something really good, and then just spam a whole bunch of exalts on it. That's what I tried to do with this weapon, because this weapon initially had physical damage and attack speed on it, so I'm like, all right, we're going. The next suggestion that I have is that I know that there's no life on the tree anymore, and it doesn't feel as easy to just invest into defenses. If you do feel like you need defenses, there are still defenses on the tree. Like right here, I still do have access to evasion and armor nodes if I want them, right? Like, I can grab armor and evasion nodes here. I can grab armor and evasion nodes here. I've got things like this node here, hard to kill, which makes it so that your flask life recovery rate is faster and you regen some life. There are things that are available to your character for defenses. If you feel like you're dying, take them. I didn't feel like I was dying because of how good the like walls are in this build. Well, one thing that I don't remember if I said or not is that when you're actively clearing stuff, one of the coolest things about Glacial Bolt in general is the fact that these walls can kind of just like block off enemies from being able to get to you. So if I'm running through, and let me just go pull a whole bunch of mobs here. Like, I'll pull too many mobs. We'll get some of these, we'll get some of these wolves, I'll get all these guys following me. Oh, we even got some blue mobs and some more wolves, right? Like, a lot of the time this is just a death sentence, right?
Block him in!
But with this skill, you see how I can kind of just like block them off from getting to me? Like, these mobs can't get to me. Like, they just can't get to me, right? So then now I'm only fighting 2 or 3 mobs. We finish those off, explode. Like, it's super powerful for defense, and I think that you shouldn't skimp out on skills that do things like this. Like, this is actually a really powerful defensive layer. Being able to freeze things and being able to block stuff from getting to you. Like, look, he like starts attacking the wall or tries running around it. It's super powerful. Don't sleep on this kind of thing. Honestly, it's really, really strong. There's a lot of different classes that have skills like this. I see people trying to brute force stuff constantly. Like I see people talking in my Discord about how they're having all these problems. Play some skills that just makes clearing stuff easier. And the last thing that I want to talk about on bosses is that bosses are tough in this game. I will say that they do have a steep learning curve. It was easier for me because I've already fought a lot of these bosses when I went to the events in LA, but I promise you, if you sit down and try to learn the mechanics of the bosses well, they are a lot easier than they seem. If you are still having problems, although you've learned the mechanic, I genuinely do think that it is probably a DPS issue. That's the problem that I see most people running into. If you feel like you're getting through the boss and you're like, I'm running out of health flasks, I'm not doing enough damage, and then you just kind of like have this like slow death that happens around like 20-25%, and you don't feel like you're getting hit by a ton of boss abilities, probably try to figure out improving your damage. The support gems that you choose are insanely important. They can make or break your build. And I will be honest with you, I'm a little disappointed in this, but the support gems that GGG has chosen a lot of the time, at least for the skills that I tried to play, the support gems that they auto tell you to do are not always that great, in my opinion. There are some better choices here. Like I would never choose, I don't know, auto reload or devastate or maim here on my build because I'm trying to go cold damage. Like with fragmentation rounds, the whole idea here is that you're trying to get the walls to do the damage, right? So why am I gonna go, like I'm not trying to heavy stun with this ability. I'm not trying to break armor with this ability. It does fizz damage, which is nice, but I'm trying to get my damage out of my glacial bolts and my walls because fragmentation rounds is designed to work around another ability that freezes. So don't always trust this, because like Glacial Bolt, one of the first things that it suggests here is Fortress. Fortress is awful on this ability. Absolutely do not use Fortress ever on this ability. It's really, really bad. However, Ice Bite and Cold Infusion are both pretty good. But you're trying to freeze with this ability, right? So you really need to be using Glaciation first. So don't 100% trust these. There's still some good stuff in here, like these aren't awful, but check to see if there's some better gems that you can use for your support gems. I am going to post a kind of temporary version of the build as it is down below in a Mobalytics link. I am working with Mobalytics now. They do pay me, so I just want you to be aware of that. This isn't a sponsored video, but I want to make that connection like obvious to you. I don't want to hide it. However, they are not influencing the guides that I make in any way. I have full creative control over everything. It is just the same as I would have been doing previously. Like if you remember the written guides that I was making before, they're just going to be written guides, and I'm going to be using Mobalytics tools to be able to do it. So check that link down below in the description. It'll have the basic layout of what I've said in this video essentially, and you could probably look forward to some more update stuff as I go along, as I move into cruel difficulty and endgame, and you can look for another update video then. Thanks for watching. I hope you had a great, I want to call it League Start, but it's not a League Start. It's early access for PoE 2. I had a lot of fun. The game looks super cool. It runs super well. I know there's some difficulty concerns for people, but I promise if you put in a little bit of effort, you will be able to get it done. I believe in you. Remember to like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you all later, the gamers.